You're listening to episode 19 of the Ento Podcast.
Looking to stay up to date on all things entomophagy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Ento Podcast with your host, Ross Bell.
Hi, and welcome to episode 19 of the Ento Podcast with me, your host, Ross Bell. So we've just got a couple of stories this week. It's a bit of a quiet week in the news from what I've been able to find. We've got EU regulation approving insects in aqua feed comes into play. A Roskilde Festival might save the planet using moth larvae mayo and cricket lemonade. And taste for insects take wing thanks to booming population. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Cricket. Cricket for all your dried, flavoured and cricket protein products. Find us at www.cricket.co.uk. So the first story we'll look at today comes from the Financial Times, and it's Taste for Insects Takes Wing Thanks to Booming Population. It's by Emiko Terrazona. There's a buzz around insects among pioneering food entrepreneurs as the health and environmental benefits of crickets, flies and worms have come under the spotlight. With the world's population expected to grow to almost 10 billion by 2050, boosting the demand for food protein, a small but growing number of companies are turning to the potential of insects as a source of food and feed. Insects are highly efficient in conversion of feed into edible material, and have a much reduced environmental footprint than other animals used for food, according to experts. They also have a high content of protein as well as vitamins and minerals. Pioneers in the sector are seeing opportunities, said Patrick Durst at the UN Food and Agricultural Organization. There is clearly a market for edible insects, and risk-taking entrepreneurs are moving quickly to capitalize, he added. The edible insect market, which includes cricket powder-based protein shakes and cookies to mealworm and fruit fly larvae-based foods, is valued at almost 100 million and is forecast to grow to more than 1.5 billion by 2021, according to Cluster, a Singapore-based emerging trends research firm. The insect feed sector is expected to reach 1 billion in 2022, from more than 30 million this year, said the company. The number of insect startups have been such that it has become a crowded market in the US, according to Aaron Dossi, who founded All Things Bugs in 2011. The company, which is this country's largest supplier of cricket powder and supplies other insect food companies offering cricket protein and powder bars such as Exo and Chapul, had revenue of $300,000 in 2016. Some of the people had predicted it would be a flash in the pan, but after a number of years, some of us are still here, he said. Although insects are eaten by 2 billion people around the world, growth in the edible sector could be limited in the US and Europe. Chris Nan of our cluster said that with insect eating viewed with certain amount of ickiness and often identified and associated with primitive behaviour, it presented a challenge for the edible insect commercial market. Some of the biggest opportunities in the US and Europe are likely to be in using insects for feed for animals and fish farming. Protix, a Dutch company which makes animal and fish feed from black soldier flies, has received €45 million, the largest investment in the insect sector to date. Its investors include Rabobank, a Dutch agricultural leader, and Aqua, an investment group focused on sustainable fish farming. We're growing a huge amount of crops in one part of the world to feed animals in another. Insects are part of the solution in reducing the environmental footprint, said Keys Arts, chief executive of Protix. Insects are a natural feed in poultry and fish, and surveys show that consumers had less aversion to eating fish and poultry reared on insects, according to Andrew Swift, chief executive of FERA, the UK agricultural research group. There is a view that animals reared on insects have a stronger immune system. The challenge for the insect sector is the lack of legislation and challenges about scaling up operations. The EU has just approved the use of insects for fish food, but potential producers, the lack of clear safety rules has been an impediment. So it's quite an interesting story, the fact that they think that there is a lot of potential for the insect food market. There are certain issues we've got within Europe that classed as a novel food for human consumption, and we now have to go through a lot of research and a lot of form filling to try and get this resolved so we can then carry on selling our products past 2019. But at the minute, the shows I've been to, the people have been open to trying whole insects, but the preferred consumption choice is the biscuits and the brownies that we bring along, where they can get the benefits from the insects without having to look at the whole insect itself. This brings us on to our next story. This is from the NME. It's how Roskilde Festival might save the planet using moth larvae mayo and cricket lemonade. It's by Helen Thomas. Hi, my name's Jacob and I come from Insect KBH, and we make bottles of juice with crickets in them. Don't know whether it's Jacob or Jacob. Sorry Jacob if it's not pronounced that way. Jacob is the co-founder of a bug startup, Insect KBH, who have a small cricket farm in the centre of Denmark's capital city of Copenhagen. He turned to bug food innovation in 2011 after reading an article on the meat industry's disastrous effect on the planet. This year he is collaborating with a group of like-minded sustainable foodies to bring bug cuisine to one of Europe's biggest festivals, Roskilde, near the capital. Since 2014 it has been Roskilde's mission to bring innovative and varied food to its 130,000 visitors in the resident food court, the home of pop-up shop Cricket, where Rukov has established his food stall. Cricket is a collaboration with Schur's Culinary School, Bugging Denmark, and the maverick Danish chef Rasmus Lech Fischer. The team are using the open-minded and curious nature of festival goers to show the possibilities of moving to an edible insect diet. Rukov explains there are so many barriers to eating insects that we struggle with as humans, but these barriers are purely in the mind. At a huge 8-day festival, punters become a captive audience who are more open to pushing themselves outside their culinary comfort zone. Fisher literally wrote the book on insect edibles, Insectivore, and has adapted his gourmet delicacies into festival-friendly street food. Already extremely popular with curious festival goers is the bug burger. Chunks of succulent chicken as served in a spicy buffalo mealworm barbecue sauce, paired with a wax moth larvae mayo and salad. The only thing with a cricket-like crunch is the toasted brioche. The burger is washed down with one of Rukov's punchy fresh lemonade juices, which miraculously contains 15 crickets, ground up and sinking into the bottom. You have to stir it well before taking a sip. If you've never had the privilege of eating an insect, here's what they actually taste like. The insects are extremely nutritious, and that is reflected in the flavour, says Fisher. It enhances everything, adds a nuttiness to all other flavours, and leaves a strong umami aftertaste, which only adds to the food, he said. At this point, the insects are still being added to the food because of their flavour, not as a replacement for anything else. The facts on bug production against the meat industry are hard to argue with. The CO2 required to make 100 grams of beef is around 2,000 times more than what it is to produce the same amount of insect meat. Rukov's crickets are almost carbon neutral. They feed on spent grain from beer breweries and the apple pulp used to produce the insect's KBH juice. They're protein rich, and the 15 cricket lemonade contains 50% of your recommended daily intake of vitamin B12, only really found in animal byproducts and supplements. The use of an underground farm in the city centre reimagines our urban spaces. I wanted to change the profile of the city as somewhere food comes in and trash goes out, to something that makes food for itself, adds Rukov. Roskilde is not the only festival where bugs are on the menu. The chef of Roskilde's ice cream parlour partner, Hansen's, tells me, last week we were at a metal festival in Copenhagen. We still served our popular festival milkshakes, but made them a little bit harder for the metalheads by adding licorice, elderflower and crickets. There's only one thing ironic about the influx of bug food as a sustainability project at the food festival. They're virtually the only thing we serve that isn't organic. It's so new to the market, the food standards don't even know how to classify edible insects as organic. Organic issues aside, insect meat could be a strong part of the future sustainable development on planet Earth. If it takes a little cricket pesto and a rock festival to get it going, then please pass me the recyclable fork. So I quite like this story that brings a couple of new foods. So when you look at a lot of the insect-based foods that you can get out there, it's generally protein bars, pastas, cookies, whereas these guys are making a lemonade out of it, or adding it to a lemonade. You got the pesto and the mayo, which I haven't seen before. It's great that sort of people are now coming out with new things to do with it rather than just biscuits and cookies. The last story we've got today comes from Undercurrent News. Its EU regulation approving insects in aqua feed comes into play. An EU regulation approving the use of insects for protein in aquaculture feed came into play on July the 3rd, according to the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed, IPIFF. EU Regulation 2017/893, which permits the use of insect proteins as fish food, applies to 7 species: the black soldier fly, common housefly, yellow mealworm, lesser mealworm, house cricket, banded cricket, and field cricket. These should have been fed with a feed-grade substrates, such as vegetal origin materials, or with a limited number of animal origin materials, including fish meal, blood products from non-ruminants, eggs and egg products, milk and milk-based products, honey, or rendered fats according to the regulation. IPIFF and its members are particularly pleased with the opening of this legislation. In our view, it constitutes a major milestone towards the development of the European insect production sector, said Antoine Herbert, IPIFF president. The unlocking of this EU legislation comes after EU member states voted a proposal presented by the EU Commission in December last year. In the meantime, IPIFF and its members are engaged in the development of a guidance paper documenting best practice in quality and hygienic insect production as a means to assist producers in implementing the newly adapted legislation. So it just sort of ties in with the other stories that we've heard today, where it's generally going to be quicker for the governments to get on board using insects as a feed to feed other animals rather than to feed us, which is good in one respect. It sort of saves on some of the growing of corn and soy and other products that we've got going on to feed cows and pigs and chickens. But I quite like the taste of insects, so hopefully we can get a few more countries and we can get a push through that it can be sold as a normal food. But that's all we've got for this week. So it's been a quiet week from what I can see from the news stories that I could find. If you've got any stories that you want to share, or you've got any events coming up and you'd like to get them out to a wider audience, then put a comment in the show notes for today's episode. So until next week, carry on eating bugs, and this is Ross saying ta-ra for now.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ento Podcast. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit theentopodcast.co.uk and on Facebook and Twitter at the Ento Podcast. We'll catch you next time.